Hey, it's Luke Frazier, CEO of Stepwise Innovation, and welcome to the Stepwise Innovation interview series, where we speak with innovation leaders and practitioners to hear about their experience in the space and to get some tips and advice on how we can all make more of an impact. To listen to all the interviews and to learn more about Stepwise, head over to stepwiseinnovation.com. We recently had Bob Thomas on the innovation series. Bob founded and runs his own user research consultancy, and he previously spent over 10 years at Liberty Mutual Insurance, where he built up a user research practice and team. Take a listen to this episode to learn about Bob's background as a technical writer and why writing 300-page product manuals led him to the research field, how he introduces abstract concepts like design thinking and exploratory research to new teams, and how Bob works shoulder to shoulder with stakeholders to generate buy-in and excitement during the research process. It was really fun to catch up with Bob on this episode, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Take a listen.
I currently run my own user research consultancy. I've been doing that for 3 years. I love it because I've been lucky enough to be able to choose who I want to work with and the kind of work I want to do. So I've even had to refuse work and refuse jobs. And I've been able to make those connections just because of my work in the field for the last 20 years. So it's worked out very well. So before running my own consultancy, as you know, I was the director of user research at Liberty Mutual for 11 years. I started there as an individual contributor. I had a nickname, Usability Bob, which was very helpful because it explained what I did.
Good branding, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Great branding. So I worked, as you know, in the personal property and casualty insurance lines at Liberty Mutual in the digital space. So everything having to do with, getting a car quote, property quote. We handled the Liberty Mutual website. We handled service and claims for customers. So I was able to build up a department and an internship program there at Liberty Mutual, which included interns from colleges like Bentley, Northeastern, Tufts. And by the time I left, I was running a co-located team of 10 user researchers. So pretty proud of what I did there. But that helped me in the basis in terms of making those connections to establish my own consultancy.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks.
So you mentioned, your current work.
Mm-hmm.
When customers come to you today, what are they looking for, or what's their current state, and how do they want it to be different?
That's great. I'm not really interested in doing sort of like one-off usability tests. I'm interested in mainly user research strategy. So at a very high level. So with the companies that I work with, one company, for example, didn't know a lot about user experience or user research. They have had people there that have been at that company for 30 and 40 years, and this is the way we do things, et cetera. So trying to introduce that sort of user research took a while, but I developed a playbook that worked, and I shared that with them. And essentially, it was a design thinking approach to user research strategy. So it involved first exploratory research, right? So talking to about 25 people, doing interviews with 25 customers who mapped to a recruiting screener of people you wanted to bring in. Mm-hmm. So that was phase one, very exploratory. Sometimes I would design the interviews around particular experiences that people had. For example, it could be around a payment plan. It could be around outages, in your area, like power outages. And what I would have people do was create a collage of their entire experience before they came in. And that was really helpful because it allowed people to prepare and think about that experience they went through. And because I had all of the internal customers or the stakeholders that worked at the company there, it was like, oh, I can't believe that people went through this process. And people were able to see those pain points that people went through. So that was phase one. Then phase two involved working with the internal teams to develop primary and secondary personas. So when you have 25 people in, you can do that and create primary and secondary personas, as well as sort of the customer journeys that they went through from point A to point B in terms of that experience. And then part 3 was doing the design sprint, where I would work with the internal teams and we would build cross-functional teams. So we'd bring in people from UX, we'd bring people from marketing, we'd bring people from product management, people from development in. They'd be part of the teams, and we developed 2 simple prototypes, usually with a sort of a process flow of 3 to 5 screens. And we would put them in front of participants. And those participants that we brought in, we would find those that most closely matched to the original 25 people that we interviewed in phase 1. So we bring in about 6 people, maybe 4 people who match to the primary persona, 2 to the secondary persona, and you would find out which prototype would win, and then you would develop that. But I think the most important thing that came out of that was, number 1, a framework to work in terms of exploratory research. And number 2, having those internal customers see the pain that people went through. So that's one example.
I love that. That is that covers a lot of things. I guess one question I should have asked earlier. So you work in user research. Why is user research important? So someone who maybe has no experience with it, why should a team either trying to improve existing products or build new ones, like invest in this type of thinking?
That's a great question. So I was originally a technical writer years ago. So I would work on documenting products. And this was back in the day when engineers and product managers would come to me and say, Bob, our users are really too stupid to figure out how these products work. So please document it and keep the manual to under 300 pages. And I thought, there's got to be a better way than writing 300-page manuals to document something. Why write a 300-page manual when you can build a product that's easier to use? So really, I think user research is all about understanding people, right? To build better products, you have to understand people. You have to talk to customers. User research is all about understanding people's behaviors, their motivations, their goals, but especially their pain points. And you want to remove those obstacles that prevent, your users, your customers from completing their goals or their tasks, whether it's getting a car quote or being able to pay a bill, being able to order something online. That's what you have to do. And otherwise, if you're not involved in talking to customers, everything just comes down to subjective opinion. I think this or think that. But really, you have to talk to people. You have to empathize with their problems. So empathy and talking to people are really at its root what user research is all about.
Yeah, that's a great story about the technical writing piece. It actually maybe a little bit off script here, but it makes me think a lot of my experience in the new product space. Sometimes a team will have a product hunch or a product hypothesis, and on the user side, the team will say, well, they don't know that they need this. They don't know what they don't know. Right. How do you kind of think about that from a, I guess, product strategy, user strategy perspective of like, we have this product hypothesis and our belief is that users don't know that they need it. Do you ever work, I'm thinking about like insurance, new insurance product is often, that's where I've heard it in the past.
That is a good question. So I'm actually working on a product right now where users dealing with it, and it's building out a new whole platform over a 2-year period. And I'm actually doing some concept testing with them. And we're trying to put new ideas in front of people in terms of, a new structure, a new layout, et cetera, and making it very, a lot easier to do things. So for example, right now, the product has 3 different carts. One for this group of people,
Mhm.
and a second for another group of people, and a third for a third group of people. And it's just really confusing. So what we're trying to do is make one cart, but to show, but to make certain features hidden for some groups and exposed for others.
Okay.
And that is really hard to get across to people because they're used to doing something one particular way.
Mhm.
So I guess to answer that question, you just have to build different ways of doing things and showing it to people. You can't ask people. I never ask people, what do you want? I never ask users what they want, because you're going to probably end up with some sort of Frankenstein design that includes everything. So it's important to develop, sort of maybe different prototypes or different ways to do that.
Awesome.
It's really important to just try things out, try new
Mhm.
things out, and put things in front of people and get people's reactions to it, to do anything. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. Yeah, so you mentioned a lot about the developing empathy and getting feedback and putting things in front of customers. You also mentioned like visualizing the pain points helps internal customers. For stakeholders or leadership or internal customers, like, how have you best brought them along in a project or gotten their buy-in? Like, what are some best practices you've seen out there?
Yeah, that's another good question. So when for example, I'll use Liberty Mutual as an example.
Mhm.
So when I first started there, everything was done in sort of waterfall. Then we moved to Wagile, and then we moved to Agile. So when I first started there, it was sort of a handoff for everything, right?
Mhm.
So it was like our stakeholders would come to an original kickoff meeting. I would want to define what the user goals were and what the business goals were. So
Yep.
your goal might be something like, I want to get a quote quickly. Business goal might be, we want to increase self-service, so people completing quotes online by 30% by the middle of the year, for example. So very, very quantifiable. And then myself and my team, or just myself when I first started, would go off and interview customers, participants, and none of the stakeholders, no internal customers were involved because they were too busy. They had to go go to all their meetings.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen that, and it still continues today. We're just a meeting driven culture. So then, 5 to 6 weeks later, after I first started, I would have this big honking presentation, and I would show it to people, and people would be in the room, and they'd be heads down, and they'd be multitasking, working on their laptops. But when the video clips came on, when I showed the participants struggling, that's when heads popped up and people were looking. And so eventually what we were able to do, and this took a few years, we were able to develop a process where stakeholders had to be involved in observing all of these interviews. It could be anywhere. We'd start maybe with 5 to 6, then maybe 10 to 12. And when we started in the design thinking approach, it would be more than that. It might be a whole week of observing customers. And I would say that might be a lot to observe 24, 25, maybe observe half of them, and then you can be involved.
Yeah.
But that makes the difference. If you're just handing things off, then people don't see what's going on. But if they're involved, especially sort of an agile structure, when you're working on things, turning things around very quickly, if they're involved, and you're working shoulder to shoulder and collaborating with people, then they see what the issues are. And I think that's the big point. And in fact, when I do user interviews like this in sort of a workshop type of format, whether it's design thinking or even usability interviews, I make the stakeholders observe and take notes.
Mhm.
And in the old days, it was like, take white pads and put things up in Post-its, but now we can use virtual whiteboards like Miro and Mural to do that. And so they're involved, they're making notes. And then you start to see more involved. Hey, Bob, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a look at this way of doing it? Maybe to your earlier point, maybe this is a product or a feature that users didn't know that they want, but we could now give to people because we've seen this pain point, and you see the light bulbs go off. But I think that's the big thing, number one, creating a framework that you can explain to people easily, like that design thinking framework that I talked about, the 3-phase playbook, number one, and number two, involving the stakeholders. They have to be involved. Otherwise, all bets are off.
Yeah, no, I love that. It makes me think of, I was working on a new product project once, and there were a lot of potential like legal risks or considerations. So we were working with an attorney in-house, and having kind of probably normal like friction between an attorney and someone trying to build something new with some risk. And for whatever reasons, we ended up asking our legal teammate to join all of our stand-ups and come to our user research sessions. And that was probably the best ask ever, because then they, like you just said, they had all the context we had. They knew the motivation behind like product choices and why we believed the things we believed, and then became advocates in the room. So we'd be presenting to leadership, and it isn't just the innovation team members that are really excited about this, when like the lawyer is also like, yeah, I heard about this pain, and this is a solution that will really have teeth when it gets out there.
Definitely. And I've even done this with ethnographic research too, where you actually go out in the field. So I would take a research with me, I'd take all our equipment so we could set things up, record things and all of that. I brought product managers out with me on the field, and we'll do a whole day or 2 or 3 of testing to try things out. And they'll be like, wow, I didn't know that these were the problems that these things had. Obviously we got to go back to the drawing board, but we've got some other ideas that came out of it, new features that we can include based on observing people directly.
Right. Question for you there that actually comes up in a lot of my work for ethnographic research is recording them. Do you record all of your like ethnographic work, or are there like trade-offs that you see in doing that?
Well, we'll have another researcher, and one will be a moderator, and one will be a note taker. We'll take pictures. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because having like someone say with a camera there, and recording, it seems kind of intrusive and unnatural. So we might just record the audio, on a computer where somebody's working, and we'll take pictures, with an iPhone or something like that. And that is a little bit less intrusive, but at least that way we've got some clips that we can do and some things that we can show people. But otherwise, if you have somebody with a camera rolling, standing right next or even far away from a person, it does tend to make it sort of an artificial environment. And with ethnographic research, you want it to seem kind of natural.
Right. Yeah, no, okay, that's great guidance there. I also love you repeating that the emphasis of creating a framework that can be easily explained.
Yes.
Especially, as you said, in the exploratory phase, that can just seem so ambiguous and overwhelming and yeah, to a lot of people. So I really like that emphasis as well, like given some structure that makes sense, so I actually know what steps I'm taking to get to this output.
Because a lot of people don't understand user experience or what it is. And, in their defense, a lot of us in the UX field haven't done a good job of explaining what user experience is.
Yeah. I think a lot of experience, or in my experience, a lot of times an internal team will hire an agency to go do this research and synthesis and output and kind of see it as like a black box of, great, we know you went out into the field. and spoke with people, and you have these recommendations for us, but I don't really know how you got from input to output.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So just kind of last couple of questions here. So you've mentioned some really great actionable advice that people can take from here. In general, if someone is new to a call it a new product role or a experience role or an innovation role within a larger company, they're just starting out, what sort of advice would you give to them?
Okay, so somebody's just coming into an innovation role in a company.
Yeah.
Talk to people. You've got to talk to your internal customers and you got to talk to your external customers. It's you have to find out what's going on, and what those pain points are. So when I usually work with my clients, what I want to do is find out, from the internal customers, what are your business goals? What are you trying to accomplish? What are the problems that you have? And I'll get a bunch of quantitative data, and it can help show me some things, but I'll say, well, what happens when you talk to people? And sometimes I'll get a big spreadsheet with lots of qualitative comments, and, I'll have to make sense of that. But it's really about, talking. It's really about talking. To me, it's talking to people and collaboration. That's really what it comes down to. Talking to your internal customers about those business goals and maybe what those OKRs are or KPIs, and then talking to your external customers, especially if you have voice of the customer people, and some market research people in your company, to find out what your customers really are struggling with, and what their needs are. So you just have to talk to people, and you have to collaborate together with your internal stakeholders and involve them in all phases of your innovation, whatever that might be.
Awesome. Before the last question about how folks can get in touch with you, Bob, I actually this morning was listening to, are you familiar with Brene Brown?
Oh yeah, Brene Brown is great.
Yeah. So I was listening to a podcast she was on, and I didn't expect it to have like business implications or research implications. I'll send you this link, because there's about 15 minutes where she and the interviewer talk about her qualitative research and his entrepreneurship experience, and just like they put some language to things that I was like, oh my gosh, this is so nicely worded. But it made me think of something she said. So she said that she shifted from one of those people with a quote on their wall of, if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter. But that today, kind of the quote on her wall is, if you can measure it, it's probably not that important.
I love that quote.
Yeah, I wanted to get your reaction to that.
It's been really hard over the years to explain the importance of qualitative data over the quantitative. And to me, the difference is quantitative data tells you what happens, and qualitative data tells you why it happens. And the only way you're going to find out, in terms of measuring things, why something happens is by talking to people. That's what it comes down to. So that's what that quote sort of substantiates for me.
Yeah.
Because so many people go, how can you find anything out? When you talk to, 5 to 6, 8 to 10, 10 to 12 people. And what I do in those cases is I go, okay, we brought in 10 to 12 people. I'm going to bring in 6 more people, okay? And you can watch the interviews. And it's like, okay, do you get the point? Do you see that we found this problem? Do you want me to bring in more people now? No, that's enough. We get it. I remember one thing that I did at Liberty Mutual where I did a clip of 12 people that substantiated my hypothesis that when you're talking about an auto quote first, the second question shouldn't be about property. And I did a clip of every one of those 12 people saying, why are you asking me this question? And I could see people go, all right, Bob, you can stop, with the clip now. We get the point. I said, no,
Yeah.
I'm going to play it all the way to the end.
I also love that you use video so much. That's really a good tool. Yeah, I also chuckled when I heard that that quote, because we'll have to do a separate conversation or session on when to be leveraging qual. Like, we could probably talk a long time about that.
Oh yeah, I love quantitative data, and
Yeah.
user experience professionals sometimes are afraid of it, afraid of stats, but I love that stuff.
Yeah. Awesome. So Bob, if folks want to reach out to you and talk user research strategy, how do they get in touch?
So they can reach me at bobthomas@outlook.com, and they can also reach me on LinkedIn, on linkedin.com. I'm trying to find it right now. linkedin.com/in/Bob L. Thomas.
Awesome. All right, Bob, thank you so much for the chat.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun catching up with you.